Hello wine lovers, Trophy Wine Hunter, welcome back to my wine channel. Today I thought I'd do a video on what is a Super Tuscan. I thought this video was opportune because I have previously done a review of Tinanello and I've recently just done a review of Sassicaia and also Ornellaia, and probably murdered all of their pronunciations, but I thought I think I've got them right in this video. Anyways, and what I'm drinking here is actually not one of the Super Tuscans. It's actually the 2017 Chateau Lagrange. So a little plug from another video that I've done. This is a Pomerol wine that I have a video on, and hopefully maybe I'll put it at the end of this video. So what is a Super Tuscan? So Super Tuscan, first of all, is not like the 1855 classification system where there's a set definition of, what is a first growth. No, someone made up the term Super Tuscan in the 70s or 80s. Some wine people or a collection of wine people or one wine person, but it's a wine term. So there's no real definition of what a Super Tuscan is. And so I'm going to give you my definition, but a Super Tuscan essentially is a wine that does not follow the rules, the traditional rules of the Chianti or Tuscan region. So how this was brought about was that, in the 70s, the Chianti region was a prolific region, and lots of people were drinking Chianti. It was very popular among North American and also Europeans. Because it was so popular, there was such a proliferation of the Chianti style of wines, and the consortium that controlled Chianti was very powerful because that name sold. And as the demand grew, then also the number of people who produced Chianti grew, and likewise the quality started to fall. But because it was so popular and because no one wanted to look out of the box, think out of the box, that was a kind of a bad thing for wine in general, because, people were just producing inferior quality product and still selling it because it was Chianti or Chianti Classico. So along came some very innovative and very brave people. And it started, the first person would be Sassicaia, which is the Marchese of San Benito San Guido. And so he, I think, is credited to being the first Super Tuscan. And so what a Super Tuscan means is that he was using non-Tuscan type grapes. So in Tuscany, they were using Sangiovese grape, and of course in Brunello, the Brunello grape. But Sassicaia and the Marchese did something completely different. He said, well, why can't we use Bordeaux blend grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot, not even use Sangiovese? That was quite a novel idea, and it really upset a lot of people. There was a lot of stakeholders that were probably, they said, well, why are you kind of bucking the trend here? Because we're all successful. What's the problem? But the Marchese wanted something different. He wanted good quality wine, and he wanted to experiment, and he wanted to make as good wines in Italy as Bordeaux. And I guess he had that foresight, but other people, and innovators are like this. They have that foresight, and probably the powers to be at the consortiums at the Chianti kind of said, well, why do that? We're already successful, but the Marchese was like, well, but I want to produce really expensive wines that rival Lafite. And probably the other people are like, that's crazy, you're being crazy. And that's, we need people like that in the world to kind of expand our horizons. And that's really a lesson to us actually in the wine world. Try not to be too pompous. And I'm talking about myself also, about our, what's a great wine. Because in 50 years, we could be all wrong. And the wines that we poop on today could be things that people enjoy 50 years from now. So, just that kind of reminds me not to be too pompous about my wine drinking knowledge or my wine drinking abilities. So I would say next would be a wine, the Tinanello wines, so the Sassicaia was produced probably in was released in 1971. The first vintage was 1968. Tinanello was produced around 1971 by the Antinori family and Piero Antinori. And so again, I guess it is a Super Tuscan, but it does use some Sangiovese. So technically, if you want to say a Super Tuscan is only wines that use non-Chianti region grapes, then it wouldn't be a Super Tuscan, but that's silly. No one thinks that Tinanello is not a Super Tuscan. What I think it means Super Tuscan is that you didn't follow the rules of Chianti, and when they didn't do that, they had to get the lowest classification, which was the Indicación Geographic Typica, or IGT designation. And that was used to basically embarrass these wineries or keep them in line. So all the consortiums thought, well, okay, you can't be a Chianti. We're going to take away the Chianti label from you, and you got to go to lowest of low, which is a table wine, IGT. And they thought that would kind of maybe stifle them or make them go back on their ways, but that didn't. And in fact, these wines, the names of these wines were even more popular than Chianti and command nowadays a higher price. I'm kind of doing this from memory, but I think the next wine which I would consider would be the Ornellaia, which came out, I think, in the mid-70s. I'll check that in the comment sections. And then Ornellaia and Masseto, which came out in the mid-85s. So to me, I know that Super Tuscans have a wide definition. It basically, some people say it's any wine that doesn't use 100% Sangiovese grapes, any wine that uses Cabernet or Merlot. To me, there's only 5 Super Tuscan wines, and those are Sassicaia, Ornellaia, Tinanello, Masseto, and Ornellaia. Because when you talk about Super Tuscans, it has to be something that transcends normal knowledge. So these are wines that are that transcend people that actually drink wines. Like a lot of people that don't have a lot of wine knowledge do know these 5 wines. And so I just go back to the definition. If you look at like superstar, let's say soccer players like Ronaldo, right? Or Messi, like those guys would be more household names with people that are not, soccer fans. Or if you're talking about hockey, like Gretzky or Gordie Howe or Sidney Crosby, those to me are superstars. That doesn't mean there are no other great players, and that's the same thing with what these Tuscan wines are, IGT wines. There's some great wines, but they're not, in my books, Super Tuscans. So again, there's no real definition, but in my books, there's only 5 Super Tuscans, and that excludes great wines like this. This is Flaccinello, which is a great wine, as a great blend wine. So again, this in wine circles may be considered a Super Tuscan, but from my perspective, would not be, not because it's not great, but because it doesn't transcend just the wine world. And this topic, again, I've covered in other videos, bits and pieces, but I'm always asked, what's the difference between Super Tuscans and Bordeaux wines? A couple of things. One is price. You get a lot of value because these are great wines. The 5 Super Tuscans that I'm talking about drink very well. They drink actually earlier than a lot of the Bordeaux superstar wines, but they have similar characteristics. They actually are very long-lived, and because they're made with Cabernet's Merlot blends, a lot of the time, some of them have Sangiovese, they have typical or a lot of Bordeaux tastes that Bordeaux lovers like, but at a fraction of the price. So Tinanello, Sassicaia, Ornellaia are all at least in Vancouver, under $300 to $500 range, and that's probably a third of the price of a Chateau Lafite. Masseto is getting up there a bit, but again, Masseto is a great wine and would be comparable to a lot of first wines, or it's been compared many times to Chateau Petrus, which is probably 4 times as much as Masseto. So you get great money for the value for Italian Super Tuscan wines. You also, I think, they drink a lot better earlier. So if I was going to drink a wine early, like a Chateau Lafite or one of the Super Tuscans, probably my bet would be that the Super Tuscan would be show better earlier. And so there's a lot of value. That's why people like that. And the third thing about Super Tuscans is that for those that have some Sangiovese in them, that acidity is a nice freshness or different component that Bordeaux doesn't offer. So those are for me, the three differences, and that's why they're so attractive. That's why, they're kind of a cross between, I would say, American cabs, which are really heavy, and Bordeaux wines, which some people find a little light. So they're kind of in the middle, and I think they have a good appeal in terms of they're in the middle in terms of price point, and they're also in the middle in terms of the palate. So I think that's why they're so popular. And given that popularity, this is what happens most of the times in wines, that when something is popular and undervalued, or wine drinkers or wine lovers see value, prices normally go up. So that's probably what you're going to see. You've seen it with Masseto, but I would think that you're probably going to see it also with Ornellaia, Solaia, and Sassicaia. Not so much with Tinanello. In my mind, and this could be my personal preference, I find that Tinanello is slightly not at the same level. I would say, in my mind, Masseto would be at the top of this heap. Then it would probably be between Ornellaia, Sassicaia, and Solaia. They're all great wines. Maybe a slight edge to Solaia, and then maybe a slight down step to Tinanello, which would be more in line with some of these wines like Flaccinello, which is actually really rising in my books, is really a great wine. And there are other great IGT wines, or you could call them Super Tuscan wines, that are out there that I haven't had, but I haven't covered in this video, but they're all wonderful. They also have some price points. The problem I have when you call wines Super Tuscan is some of these wines, the pricing is fairly reasonable, so it's not the same pricing, and so when you kind of lump them into Super Tuscan, there is a certain expectation also in terms of pricing, and so when you say Super Tuscan, it's hard to apply it to wines that are, in the lesser range than Ornellaia. I think that's almost disrespectful, because these are the 5 wines that have really paved the way for all the other wines. Not saying the other wines aren't good, not saying that they weren't produced at the same time, but I'm saying that they did not garner the international acclaim that that the other wines did, and so they should get that credit for that in my books. Hope this video has been helpful, and hope that you'll enjoy my upcoming tasting of my Ornellaia, and you'll be able to compare my 3 videos that I've had so far of Tinanello, Sassicaia, and also Ornellaia. Until next time, happy drinking.